Good morning. How is everybody? Oh, good. I'm Elaine, your service leader this morning. I have the great pleasure of welcoming you to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Rappahannock. We gather in fellowship every Sunday morning, coming from different backgrounds, walks of life, celebrating our diversity of lifestyle and personal beliefs. All are welcome. May our joining together be a blessing to each of us this morning, and a special welcome to our visitors. Please silence your cell phones if you're not already. And as we light our chalice, if this little bitty flame will work. There we go. Very special chalice this morning. There's a candle in our hearts ready to be kindled, a void in our souls ready to be filled. Embrace the flame. That's from Rudy. As we light our chalice this morning, let it help us each become just a little more personally centered during this holiday season, with a loving nature, faith in ourselves, and a spirit that defaults to welcome to whomever we meet. So for our opening words, I'm reading from our booklet today because I sort of didn't know I was going to be your service leader. So we're going to have a great good time this morning.
All good.
It is all good. There's a place in where you have never been wounded, where there is still sureness in you. This is beautiful. Where there's a seamlessness in you, and where there is a confidence and tranquility in you. And I think the intention of prayer and spirituality and love is now and again to visit that inner kind of sanctuary. That's a quote by John Donahue, and it is in your bulletin this morning. I will not introduce you to Sara Mackey because we all know and love her. She's spoken with us many times. So let me just welcome her to do her reading and then speak later.
Thank you. Good morning to you. I'm always happy to be here and see your faces.
Good morning. Good morning.
The reading this morning is it's by Meg Barnhouse, who's a UU minister and musician. And the book is called The Best of Radio Free Bubba. She used to be, this is 20, maybe 25 years old. So keep that in mind. She and some friends of hers were commentators on this radio show down in North Carolina, maybe South Carolina. And this is a collection of their commentaries. And by the way, she mentions at the end the Lilith Fair, which I had never heard of. I had to look it up. It's a music venue, a concert that's for women. So that's what Lilith Fair is. And this is called Government Wave Machines. I have to rant and rave for a minute. I just got off the phone with a friend in Atlanta. I like almost everything about her except her politics. Her views make me crazy. She's out there in that ideological swampland where the far right and the far left meet in a queasy murk of conspiracy theories. Once she gets going, she can murmur for an hour about the international monetary system and how they are plotting to control the world economy. It's this they that sends me into sputtering rational overdrive. Who are they? She says they are sending low-level vibrations through people's computers that change the energy balance in people's bodies. They send things through people's computers, I asked. Well, through their modems when they're plugged in. Why? It seems to stoke her for a minute, but she rallies. It's been shown that certain government agencies understand that there are people who are operating at a higher vibrational frequency than others. because they've done cellular transformation through body work and meditation, and they are not operating in a paradigm of fear anymore. That sounds like a good thing, I say. Yes, but they would rather people be fear-based and more easily controllable. So they send out these waves that change the level at which people can vibrate. Whenever there's a large gathering of people, they send out these waves over the crowd. Let me get this straight, I say. There's a government agency that's organized enough to send out waves over crowds gathered in Spartanburg or San Francisco so they can interfere with enlightened people to keep them from operating at a higher vibrational frequency so they'll stay fearful. I don't know whether to be scared or glad that some government agency has things together all that well. I've worked in government, and believe me, government appears to be run by people about like you and me who ride into work every day on the train and think about Saturday night while they're supposed to be doing the work of the nation. There's infighting between branches of agencies, and there are power plays at every level, so petty as to be surreal. I once sent a stack of documents to be copied. Because of regulations, they had to be sent to a special copying office. It was 2 blocks down from the office where I was. The runner took 3 hours to come pick it up. The next day, I waited for the copies. Nothing. The day after that, the runner reappeared. He was carrying the original stack of documents with a note attached. He wasn't allowed to wait while I read the note and responded. I had to call another request for another runner to take my response back to the copying office. I read the note as the runner left. We cannot copy documents with paper clips still attached. In the middle of my stack of documents was one paper clip holding 3 pieces of paper together. It took whoever wrote that note longer to write the note than it would have taken them to remove the paperclip. That's just one story from government. We've all heard about the $250 toilet seats that the CIA guys and the CIA guys that are selling secrets and driving Rolls Royces to work on a $60,000 salary. And no one questioning for years where they got that kind of money. Is this the government that has the technology, the desire, and the organization to send waves over large gatherings to unenlighten some people who've done body work? I'm sorry, I can't believe it. I have never worked with any group of people who could pull off something so intangible, expensive, and bizarre for any period of time. Unless there was some fabulous money in it, I can't see it happening. Of course, in 20 years, when my children and I are living in a world full of fearful zombies, controlled by tyrannical world orders, I'll be sorry I made fun of it. Meanwhile, the picture of a group of government bureaucrats operating wave machines from a corner at the Lilith Fair makes me smile. I feel my vibratory frequency changing. I'm not afraid. When I was in seminary years ago, I studied Old Testament in my first year with a professor that we were all somewhat terrified of because he was such a brilliant man. Obviously, as we got to know him, it evolved that he was a kind and gracious person. He cared about his students. He wanted us to do well in this new environment that was just so challenging to us. One of the reasons that he was intimidating was that he was on the committee that translated the book of Deuteronomy from Hebrew into English for the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, which was the version that we used in seminary and the version that I still use. He knew more about the Old Testament than we would ever know, and he knew it in Hebrew. I admit that I remember practically nothing about that class, except one thing did stick. We were looking at a particular passage, and I don't remember which one it was, and the professor told us about the conversations that the people on the translating committee had about this one passage. He said, so-and-so thought it should be this, and thus and such thought it should be slightly different. And we talked about it, and everybody gave their opinions, and everybody went back and forth about it, and eventually these people persuaded those people, and we came to this translation. And what I learned from that class session didn't have anything to do with the passage. What was so valuable to me was how much intent they put into working on that translation. Translation matters. It's subjective, and it depends on who is sitting around the table doing the translating. The book of Deuteronomy in the New Revised Standard Translation could have been a little different from what it is now. And it was the result of carefully thought out perspectives from scholars with integrity and devotion to the legitimacy of the text that made it the way it is. Devotion to the text was at the core of the discussion, and yet it was unavoidable that each person brought their own experience to the table. They listened to each other, they respected each other's contributions, and they made a choice. It could have been a different choice, and the different choice would have still been valid. We Unitarian Universalists don't think much about translation, since we're generally speaking the same language when we gather. But even in English or whatever the common language is, we use language that is comfortable to us. Religious language, which we sometimes do not use, is subjective, and it can be translated. We are often not even aware that we can translate it, much less how to translate it. As I've been involved with Unitarian Universalist churches and district meetings and General Assembly and SUSE, Southeast Unitarian Universalist Summer Institute, I have learned that it's not unusual for Unitarian Universalists to reject mainstream religious language. I'm accustomed to people resisting words, especially ones that have Christian connotations. Words such as God, church, prayer, holy, hymn. I've heard people say, I don't use that word. It makes me uncomfortable. Or, I don't like that word. What I long to ask, and what I'm asking today, if any of these things sound familiar to you, what is it that makes you uncomfortable? What is it that you don't like? Imagine that rather than being made uncomfortable by these words, you can translate them to mean concepts that have value for you. You can claim these words for your own rather than being disturbed or unsettled by them. You can diminish the power that these words have, power that was infused into them by somebody else. And you can translate these words so that they mean something to you in your own language. The word God is a good example, and I'm going to use that one because it comes up so often as a word that people reject. People have told me in the past, especially when I worked with the teens, that they don't believe in God. And the question I have is, what is it that you don't believe in when you don't believe in God? And how do you know that's God? And who told you that was God? And could you say, I don't believe what I have been taught about God? Imagine you could define the word God for yourself, so that when you say that word, you mean your own definition. God is a code word, and it's translated who knows how many times, according to who's saying it. When I first became involved with the UU Church, some people that I knew asked me if I believed in God. And I said yes, knowing perfectly well that what I meant when I said I believed in God was not what they meant when they said they believed in God. And for me, part of being a Unitarian Universalist meant that it didn't matter how each of us translated that word. You may be wondering, why should we translate religious language? Why not just reject it? If we are rejecting somebody else's definition, then translating the language lets us claim something that some past experience has determined for us and has taken away from us. If religious language is disturbing, we can ask, what's disturbing about it? What if the definition of religious language belonged to us, rather than being imposed upon us? And what if we got to infuse it with the meaning that has value to us? Religious language, more than any other, is subjective. And that means that we, in our own search for truth and meaning, we get to define what it means when we're speaking it. Our own comfort levels are one obvious reason for translating religious language, and there is another more compelling reason. We need to be able to speak a common religious language because it's a crucial way to welcome strangers. And that's what we say we do. You built this church as a lighthouse. You know how it looks out there. As a lighthouse, and in the days to come, shining your light is going to be an act of radical hospitality, more so than it has ever been up until now. In her message after the election, UUA President Reverend Sophia Betancourt, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, you don't know? Betancourt, the UUA president, said, "We are a sanctuary people. We can't know," she said, "what's coming, but we know what's going to be asked of us. We know what's going to be asked of us." You know a lot more than I do about this area that you live in. And yet I can imagine that since the election, there is possibly more fear here, more anxiety, more real threat to immigrants in the Northern Neck, to LGBTQIA people, even politically liberal people that are straight white men. Unitarian Universalists have sent out a clear message. If you go to the UUA website and look right at the top, it says, "Live your values aloud, not alone." Our open-minded, open-hearted spiritual communities help people lead lives of justice, love, learning, and hope. Hear those words. Open-minded. Love, justice, hope. Imagine that somebody who was raised in a mainstream Christian faith, who knows nothing about Unitarian Universalism, reads that message on the website and decides maybe they'll try visiting a UU church. And suppose they come here seeking hope, justice, love, relief from fear. We must be able to speak the language that they know and embrace, even if the word God, for example, means something different to them from what it means to us. When we say we welcome everyone, we must welcome their religious language, especially in this fraught time when what divides us is more emphasized than what unites us. If somebody came here speaking only Japanese, we would not say, "You're welcome here, but we don't speak Japanese here. It makes us uncomfortable." We would do anything we could to figure out how to talk to them. Imagine that a gay person or a trans person, for example, sees that we are a welcoming congregation and decides to visit, carrying fear about what this coming administration might mean for them. Imagine that this person has been hurt by church in the past, but still longs for church, a church that's affirming and validating. Imagine hearing what we sang this morning. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing for our lives. Imagine what a healing message it would be for that person to hear, this is a hymn. This is not a popular song. This is sacred. This is a hymn. Imagine an immigrant family coming, fearing for their future. We'll sit in silence with them. We'll enter into a time of meditation with them. But imagine how much more healing it might be to them to hear us say, "We will pray for you." Prayer is a subjective word. For them, it might be asking God in heaven to keep them safe and to protect them. For us, it might mean speaking their names to the universe in a spirit of love and hope. The universe, God, whatever code word you use, doesn't matter to them what our language is. The important thing is that we have offered anxious people comfort in a language that they speak, and it's something that we can speak as well. Translating religious language so that it belongs to us is a healing experience for us and an act of justice on behalf of people who might be seeking us in these turbulent times when so many people feel threatened. We may come to church seeking comfort for ourselves, and engaging religious language might make us uncomfortable. But as Reverend Betancourt says, we know what may be asked of us in the months to come. We know our comfort might not be the only thing that matters. We know it will be important for people who might be drawn to this place to hear language that they understand and can speak language that is for them. We can do that to honor our promise and our purpose, to love our neighbors, to offer hope and healing, to be a sanctuary people. And so may it be.
Questions, comments, discussion?
Thank you, that was wonderful. My parents were liberal Christian Episcopalians, whiskey heavens, and they held it pretty straight the whole time until they got into their late 70s, early 80s. And then, all of a sudden, they started talking about them and they. And I didn't really pay too close attention to that at first. And my father passed first, but then I took care of my mom a long time. And she developed quite a radical switch to a very, conservative, English-only kind of position. And she kept referring to them and they as, some authority. And then when she reached the point of passage, she started talking about the council. And that the council was calling her. I'd like for your background, your study, to bring into our, for me, in this language, what those things mean to people who have always been religious and liberal politically, but then somehow it switched. And I don't know what it was. It's a mystery.
It is indeed a mystery, and I don't know, but I have heard minister colleagues. It's fairly usual for people that are very close to death to experience others, the council, people that they don't know. I don't know what that is, but it happens. So it must be something. I don't know. I got no answers. Don't look to me for answers. I got all the questions you need, but I got no answers.
When I was teaching, was a past high school level college biology class, and I had this really smart kid in my class, but he challenged me right and left daily. And for me, one of the unifying concepts of biology is evolution. And I am bound to teach this because it is a biological fact, or close to a fact. No, it's a fact.
Yes.
But every time I said evolution, he'd jump to his feet, point his finger to the sky and say, evolution. That was the kind of kid he was. But he got me thinking, because his answer so often was, it's in the Bible where Jesus said this. And I was just thinking, what if Jesus didn't say, I am the way, but I am a way? I never had guts enough to challenge him, but that was quite a thought.
And we don't have anything that Jesus did not leave anything that Jesus himself wrote. All that we know is told by people that came after Jesus' death and wanted to maintain the teachings. So we don't have any direct quotes from Jesus, no matter what the Bible says. But that I could have talked to that kid a little bit, but I don't know.
I give you his name.
I was born and raised in a Catholic environment, went to parochial school from kindergarten to 12th grade. And in those 13 years, if I had two lay teachers, were a lot. They were all nuns.
Yes.
And one of the things that I get with my age or, experience, is the hypocrisy of the Christianity here in this country. I don't know, I cannot judge other countries. But I just see the hypocrisy, and that kind of takes away from the belief of Christ, because these are people, they carry the name Christian, they carry his name, and they're so opposite of what he wants, or he thought of. And it's conflicting, you know, because it kind of lowers the meaning of Christ, you know, when these people call themselves Christians and acting as, you know, so horribly. So it's something that I'm battling with.
I don't know that it lowers the meaning of Christianity. It might lower the meaning of the people, the validity of the
That's
people
why I
who
say
say
in
that.
this country,
But,
yes.
yeah.
Knowing that throughout millennia, people have created their gods
Yes.
to worship. And knowing that, but you know, I have a family I love that are Southern Baptists, and they're very strict about what their God is. And other people need not to apply. In other words,
Yes.
within their church, the different communities, LBG plus and all, and gay, they're discriminated against. And so how do you know, sometimes because I love them, I want to find a way to talk with them in a, where there's not anger or misunderstanding. So that's really a challenge when you're talking to people who feel that this God that they believe in is very narrow and very judgmental. And so that's kind of a tough conversation
It
sometimes.
is indeed, and I don't know that there's anything you can do except enter the conversation with your heart open, and what they do is out of your hands. I don't know whether you can change their minds or not.
Serenity prayer, girl.
I wish, but I don't know. Yeah.
I imagine you did not coordinate with the message for all ages this morning,
Yes.
but I thought there was great synchronicity in that. And as I listened to that story he told about the little girl experiencing her peers in the community, hearing about God and then asking, what does it mean? I actually felt a little bit sad for that child, that basically the parent said, you gotta figure it out yourself. And we'll sort of left her alone to figure it out herself. But to me, that's a story of why it's so important for us as UU, I'm thinking as UU parents, but as UU individuals, to at least have conversation and not avoid talking about God, because everybody on the playground is out there talking about God, and we need to know and understand where they're coming from. And many people that talk about God are talking from a loving position. Yes, there are many that have a different version of God than we might, but we need to be able to explain to our children what they're talking about, and we can explain it with an open-ended, this is what they believe, but it's important to keep talking about that and have that vocabulary out there for our children and for each other and for the other children on the playground.
Well, Sarah, this is really interesting. Occurred to me, there's a parallel between biblical interpretation and constitutional interpretation. The constitutional interpretation, there's a debate about how you should approach it, but one of the most thoughtful, persuasive ideas to me is that the framers, when they use certain words like due process or equal protection or something like that, there's such a sweeping, kind of grand precatory idea that they assumed that future generations were going to read into that what represented their current values. So the idea that you want to know exactly what was in the head in a fixed way of a frame, the Constitutional Convention, it just really doesn't make any sense. Well, you apply that to some of the books of the Bible, not all, but Genesis, for example. Some things, maybe the interaction between the angel and Mary announcing the good news of her life, when things were intended by the authors to be poetry and myth, they foresaw that future generations would read into that
Exactly.
what was meaningful to them. So it becomes particularly silly to get off into precise interpretations of fixed meaning when that was not the idea in the first place.
And I think you're entirely right, and it is interesting that the Constitution is the same and I think there is a nuance though when you're trying to determine what the Hebrew to English rather than the essence of the story. And it was just very powerful to me to hear Dr. McBride talk about how much energy they put into trying to get the Hebrew into English just right and how much they talked about it. Nobody just said, well, it doesn't really make that much difference, does it?
Thank y'all for inviting me.
You're welcome.
All right. So I had a little something I wanted to say with everything everyone said, but I kind of came to again, a very generalized prescription is that we all have this human tendency to become inflexible, and we all have a tendency to sort of simplify things in a very grand picture, or at least a cohesive one. And I find that the easiest way to get along with the people is to find that lowest common denominator. If it's, for example, the Baptist church or the child who wants to use just part of the word evolution, and you just tell them to say it backwards. And there's just there's so many things you can do to just not swing for the fences. And that's what humans do. We try and we know our point's right. We can't humble ourselves enough just to back up and change the subject, and that usually fixes a lot. And I agree with the whole fellowship thing. It's good to meet up with people.
Sarah, thank you so much. That was As we extinguish this flame, let us keep its light in our hearts. And may we remember, while each of us carries but a tiny light, together we can light up the world. Sarah, do you have closing words?
I always do. Do you all join hands? Do you want to? Let's make a circle like the olden days. Now, go in peace. May you leave this place knowing that you are good and knowing that you are loved. Take your light and your love away from here and share them with this wounded world that is going to need you. And stay safe, my friends, until we meet again. Blessed be. Amen. Blessed.